No more clickbait, no more sound bites, and no more videos that are over before you blink. No more being told to click this or to share that because some people think you can't think. Choose a new way of doing things. Choose real people. Choose real stories. Choose the Real Talks podcast. An All-Ireland winning captain with Tipperary in 2016, Brendan Maher is one of the most recognised and respected hurlers in the modern game. A medal haul that includes 2 All-Irelands and 5 Munster titles at senior level, as well as 1 under-21 and 2 All-Ireland minor titles. It's safe to say that at this stage Brendan has been there and worn the jersey. Despite all of that success, Brendan remains one of the most charismatic and down-to-earth GAA players I have ever come across. A common complaint I've often heard in recent times is that Gaelic games are no longer producing interesting personalities. But, as I hope you will hear over the course of the next hour, this Tipperary warrior is an intriguing character with a fascinating outlook on life, sport, leadership and communication. This podcast is brought to you thanks to support of Kelly Bradshaw Dalton, who for over 20 years have been successfully selling, renting and managing property in the Greater Dublin area. You can check out their website at kbd.ie, that's kbd.ie, for all your property needs. My name is Alan O'Mara, and you are listening to the second ever episode of the Real Talks podcast.
GAA President Eoghan O'Farrell making the presentation. Liam McCarthy goes to the tip captain, Brendan Maher. Tipperary are back. They're back once again as champions under Michael Ryan. Cue the celebrations. They're champions for the 27th time ever. Rightful All-Ireland champions for 2016. What a day for them.
McCarthy and Locker. There's on for Timberland! We waited 6 long years, but now we're back!
Listen, I was doing my research last night over the last couple of days, just checking about sort of the angles that I knew I was going to want to talk to you about. And first and foremost, I think I should clarify that I found no dirt on you. You'll be glad to know.
I'm clean.
Nothing came up on the Google search anyway. But,
thank God.
Where I was going to start, Brendan, and I think it was just the obvious one that just jumped out off the page for me a lot, was the year 2010.
Yeah.
When I was reading through notes and different interviews and different reports, with that particular week that you had in September, I'd say is as close to living the dream as most kids would ever imagine when they were younger. Because it's a number of years on now, we're almost 7 years on from that now. When you reflect back on that time, and particularly that week, what comes to mind, or how do you feel about that spell now?
It seems like a long time ago now, and it is. Look, I mean, it's 6.5 years ago. It was an unbelievable year, and even for myself personally, it was a great year. I performed really well the whole way throughout the year, and it was probably my first year as a regular starter with the senior team as well, so really important that I wanted to stake a claim, and there was a lot of things going on, and the thing that jumps out with me, I suppose, if I was to think back, is I was just completely free that year, and I was performing with absolutely no fear. It was only my second year on the panel. There was a number of us in the same situation, so we felt like we kind of had each other. So I didn't feel as if I was on my own as a new starter on the team. There was a number of us that kind of did it. We kind of had that transition at the same time.
And who were the guys that came through with you at that period?
Yeah, myself, Pádraig, Noel, Michael Cahill and Bonner were the 5 under-21s that year.
Not a bad crop of lads.
Yeah, we had a strong minor team, and that group kind of stuck together. You could throw in likes of Shamie Canlan, Grode Ryan, Seamus Hennessy, these guys. It was a group of us that kind of joined the panel all at once. Pa Burke, Thomas Dale.
Okay.
I think there was 10 of us, and so we very much felt like a group joining another group. So that was really important. And it's probably only now that I realise how important that was, that we had each other. But really enjoyed that year. A lot of, I suppose I didn't really realise the pressure that was on us. We were kind of we were after coming off the back of winning 2 minors, contested in All-Ireland, would say under 21, just out of minor, and then we were into the senior team. So we were just kind of used, I suppose, to being in those situations. Obviously it escalated an awful lot when you're playing the senior All-Ireland, but we had the experience in 2009 then. playing against Kilkenny and, running them close, and it's a well-documented game. And, 2010 then it just seemed to... it wasn't all straightforward. We got beaten by 10 points by Cork down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. That was an unbelievable learning experience for us as well.
And that's forgotten about now in the history books for most part.
Exactly, and I just really I can remember that year just being so at ease and just really free, and just kind of, I always refer to that flow state. Sure. And you're always trying to get that flow state. And I definitely had it that year, and that week then just really that was the pinnacle, to win the Senior All-Ireland on the Sunday. And I remember doing a pool session on the Monday then with all the 21s that were involved in the senior panel. Probably had a fair hangover, but got the pool session done and back to training. And just that Saturday night, I'll never forget, there was over 20,000 in Semba Stadium, and we played Galway in that final, and I think we had an amazing start. We had 3 goals scored after 10 minutes or something.
Yeah, you completely blitzed them, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was a blitz.
Yeah.
It wasn't a fair reflection on the two teams, and I somewhat nearly felt sorry for the Galway team at the time, because we were just on such a roll and we just got such a good start. It wasn't a fair reflection on the two teams at the time. But I mean, talk about a week, within 6 days, having the two experiences was just unreal. Yeah,
to win a Senior All-Ireland and follow it up with the Under-21 All-Ireland within those couple of days must have just been an incredible experience. And I think you touched upon it there. The Under-21 final was almost probably just you're riding out the wave as such. But just curious from your own perspective, when you say, because the word free you said 2 or 3 times and you touched upon, why do you think that was, you felt that so much that year? Was it the naivety of youth? Was it just that it was a new experience?
I'd probably say we didn't realise how much, if to us we were just playing, and we didn't actually realise how much it meant to everyone, how big hurling was in Tipperary even. We were aware, we were after coming off playing minor and under-21, but senior is a whole new level. And
it's a different ball game.
It was just, we didn't feel the pressure really. We probably put pressure on ourselves. We had high expectancy levels of ourselves from being involved with the successful teams underage. And we kind of just let that kind of come along. And we probably just, there was a no fear attitude among the group, because there was no expectation there. And what followed then, I suppose, was that expectation, and we weren't used to dealing with that. And, there was a lot of change. There was change in management, change in players, and there was just a lot of uncertainty among the group. And, the period that followed then was probably when we learned the most about ourselves and the most about each other. And, I'd like to think that the last few years then we've put that to good use. We had a massive transition in terms of playing personnel, managements, and just that natural development and evolution of people then as well. Physically, emotionally, there was a lot going on naturally. And obviously lads had things going on off the pitch as well, with college and trying to get jobs, and there's a lot that goes on that people aren't aware of, I suppose, and even as players we probably not are aware of it enough. That whole self-awareness of the importance of your off the pitch career. I've spoken about this before, about being in a bubble. I found I was in a bubble from 2010 for a few years there, where it's almost like work is just work. You only do it just as a means to get a few quid, and you're just focused completely on sport and on that inter-county hurling. And you don't. I would love to see people putting as much effort into their off pitch career as they do, because it is possible to balance it. But I definitely think there's an imbalance among a lot of players, myself included, as going through my mid-20s, where I was just in that bubble, didn't think enough about my career off the pitch, was happy with what I was doing, but didn't actually get the best out of myself in that time. Just focused so much on sport that I neglected other things.
To go into 2010 as you guys did, and I have a bit of confession that the 2010 All-Ireland final was the first All-Ireland final I was ever at. Yeah, I was working in Croke Park at the time. I was in the communications department, and so I'd been working there all summer. It was building up, so this was the first final, and I remember I'd be just completely and utterly blown away by it. I was like, holy shit, just the physicality of it, the intensity, just everything about the day, and I could just feel everything. And you probably, I doubt I said this to you before, I don't think you know, but I was actually in your dressing room after the game. Yeah. Someone looking at me going, who's this little creep sneaking into the door? But no, it was my job to actually go in and I had to get one or two of the lads out to do the media interviews. And when I walked in through that door, I have to put my hand on my heart. To this day, I've never seen an actual emotional changing room like it. And I mean that honestly. It was just, there was someone playing music in the corner. There was lads dancing on benches. And I actually, like, but as a player and just as the person that was working there, I actually felt bad for having to ask someone to leave that space. Because it was just, to be there on that day, to feel that and for the snowball. I think you touched upon it there then, trying to move on from that. And it obviously did bring difficulties both for individual players as young lads trying to, you know, because there's football and there's real life and they're not always the same thing. Like if I'm looking at it from even your perspective when I'm thinking. So obviously minor title in 06. You get captain the minors to All-Ireland title in 07. And then it sort of, that snowballs, and you said the under 21 All-Ireland final in 2008 against Kilkenny, is it? It was going into 2010, like, without being smart, there must be a little voice in the back of some lad's head going, this is actually easy, lads. Like, we're like, do you know?
Yeah, there probably was that, And like, the one thing that Liam Sheedy always, and what we were, you know, we had Liam in 2006 as minors, so we were very comfortable with him. So that was a huge thing for us as well. We weren't coming into a new manager as such. We arrived into the panel to Liam, who we knew. Yeah,
you knew what you were getting.
I had played
and he knew what he was getting.
I played under 2 years of him, minor, in 05 and 06. And he just encouraged us. He had placed so much trust in us. He just encouraged us to be ourselves and express yourself. And I think that's what you saw in the dressing room, was just lads, like, absolutely not caring, like, you know, like, there's that perception of, you know, you have to be this way, you have to be that way. Everyone was themselves and everyone expressed themselves. And that was our group. And I suppose with the win then, what happened was there's this pressure of you have to do this, you know, you have to be a certain way and you have to be this and you have to be that. And I think we lost our identity a little bit. And there was a big change, obviously, then was the change in management. That was a shock to us all. Nobody saw it coming. And we suffered to get over that. Because, you know, we had been so successful, especially us that had been with Liam at minor level.
There was a lot of history there.
And it was just a massive change. And what happened then was that you had so much change in management and you had change in personnel then as well and players, that there was almost like an element that culture just changed to, like, some lads started trying too hard. Other lads kind of maybe gave up on it a little bit, saying, like, you know, like, it's not as good as it was, like, or it's different, and didn't accept the change. And like, it was a different setup, like, and it depends on what way you take it, like. So we just had a bit of fighting with each other, like, as in not actually fighting with each other, but fighting with the change that happened and
who we are and
exactly like, well, where do we actually want to go? What do we want to do? Look, we got to an All-Ireland again in 2011. We had quite a steady year, but we didn't get to the performance levels. Like, we had a great performance in Munster final against Waterford. We blitzed Waterford below in Cork, but then when it came to the really high pressure situation, we didn't have that identity and that unity that we had the year before. And it showed in the All-Ireland. We were beaten by 4 points against Kilkenny. And that snowballed on the following year. We were never able to grab that unity back and that kind of carefree attitude and carefree culture where let's go out, be the best that you can be and just express yourself. And there was a lot of pressure from the Tipperary public and we felt that majorly. And we were like, I remember one of the lads like saying, I've just realised I've played the last 3 or 4 years with fear. And that is not a nice place to be. And being aware of that, that's when we started to change. We became aware of actually how we were acting and the way we were. We weren't being ourselves. We were trying to be something that we weren't. We weren't expressing ourselves. We weren't being the players that we knew we could be. And we slowly tried to build that back up again. And obviously there was a lot of retirements, a lot of change. And, you know, we've stayed reasonably competitive. There is a lot of regrets that we haven't won as much as we would have liked to. But in saying that, overall, I mean, when you look at, like, I'm lucky enough, I think, in the medals that I've won since I joined the panel in 2009. I have 5 Munster medals, 2 All-Irelands, it's not a bad return. There is regret that you could have had more.
I think there always will be. No matter what you have, you'll always say about this one or that one.
Yeah, but I think what we did was we just accepted who we were, what we've achieved or what we haven't achieved. Now, what can we do now? And let's just create us, and we have a clear identity of what we want to be now, our style of play, what we want to be known as, what we want to be remembered as. That's just really clear for us and for the group. So that's what we're working for.
I might come back to 2016 a little bit later on. Out of curiosity, I'm thinking yourself as a young man coming up, been involved in all those teams that are winning. Even as you're talking there, your passion and your love for hurling just oozes out of you. It screams off you. But I suppose, in terms of your own identity and your own personal self, was hurling... Well, is it still all-consuming, or was it all-consuming back then? I suppose is the first question. And the second question is it still all-consuming for you?
Hurling has been a massive part of me since I was young. Since I come from, what you'd call that hurling family. That kind of way people say, I'm the youngest of 4 boys, 3 lads ahead of me, all played with Tip at some level. Most recent was my brother Martin, played cornerback, 2003. Had to retire with injury 2006.
Okay. I presume he's also played in the back garden as well, did he?
Oh, sure, look, that was where it all started and where it'll all finish, hopefully.
Yeah.
It definitely, it's been a huge part of my life, and it has been my identity, I suppose, definitely to the public. More locally, people would know me, I'd like to think would know me and know the person rather than the hurler. And that's something that I try and place an awful emphasis on, that I don't want to be known as just a hurler. I want to be known as a genuine person and someone who has maybe contributed to the community in some way. I don't want to be that guy who was just an inter-county hurler and didn't care about where he came from or didn't care about his community. That's the way I want to be remembered. But definitely, there was a period where I was in that bubble, and you're just concentrating so much on hurling and trying to get hurling right that you neglect friendships, relationships, even with family members. You don't get to do all those family occasions you miss, and a lot of it still has to happen. But it's about making the effort to make sure that you find time for family and for friends and for relationships. I think that's so important, and that's something that I have tried to do in the last couple of years. Is just to spend more time with my family and to just it's put things into perspective. I suppose that sport is sport, and I've just found that I'm a lot more content and I'm actually enjoying the sport a lot more than So
you seem as if you're at a slightly more mature stage of life, and you've recognised a few different things. I suppose I'm looking for a bit of insight into what that balanced lifestyle is now, with that bit of wisdom that you've picked up over the last couple of years, and if it's a day-to-day thing or a week-to-week, what do you do to find that balance to make sure you keep the weighing scale in kilter? I'm not afraid
to go somewhere or do something that maybe in my head before I would have thought that's wrong, it's going to affect your performance, this kind of stuff.
What do you mean by that?
For example, like something as simple as having a glass of wine with dinner at a family occasion or something.
Yeah, just that stuff is mad that you let it into your head, isn't it?
You get into this mode where you think if you don't drink 3 litres of water every day, that you're going to become a bad hurler or you're going to become a bad performer. And there's a lot of things a lot of boxes you need to tick to perform and you're optimal, right? But I think that the balance of I suppose the easiest way to explain is that I put more effort into my rest and recovery and energy management than I have ever had. Whereas I was always really good to train, really good to give 100%, always committed.
Go hard or go home job.
But almost I was one of those lads who tried too hard and was putting too much in, and doing extra sessions and just training too hard in general. Whereas now I'm aware of when I need to rest, and I would pick out days where, just for example, with my girlfriend, where we're both off on a Friday. So we make sure that we keep Friday free, that we can do something together.
Yeah.
And instead of me saying, I might go to the alley and do a session, or, just little things like that, or going, if there's something on where it's a family dinner or something, before I would have went and like, no, I'm not going to have a dessert, or I'm not going to have that. But now I'm not afraid to like say, well, no, look, I'm going to have a treat, or I'm going to just relax a little bit for an hour. And look, I'll train hard next week, and I just feel like I have a good balance. Now there has to be a balance where there is a line you can cross where you can get too lackadaisical and your performance does suffer. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to find a balance of how can I get the best out of myself on the pitch, but also get the best out of myself off the pitch. And I wasn't aware of that, and that has been life changing for me to over the last couple of years actually realise, like, you know. It was probably the biggest point for me was after the All-Ireland last year, where you have the whole elation of winning, and being captain was such a proud moment for me, going back to the hometown and all that. And then a few days later, you're back to work, the season is finished, you have the club and it's brilliant, and then you just start thinking, and then we got knocked out of the club, and then I was like, right, I've work, hurling is finished, nothing until January, you know. And I started kind of thinking then, well, is this what it's going to be like when I retire and when I stop playing? And am I actually getting the most out of the rest of my life to actually meet the needs, like, and satisfy me as a person? And that was when I kind of started saying, like, you know, look, maybe you need to look at something else, like, and there's other things that I want to try and I want to explore, and that's what I'm doing now.
You mentioned, I suppose, the work aspect that as well, because I think sometimes if you hear, you tune into odd conversations here, and people just say, "Oh, the GA, it's gone so professional," and it's like it's close professional as it'll ever be. But I think you touched upon it nicely there, and that like a couple of days after the final, like, you're back to work, and it's always I think it's important just to take a minute to sort of actually put that out there, that people don't forget and don't get lost in this whole bubble around the quality of the games and the fitness and the physicality, but like, people still have to go to work. And what is your work situation at the moment? That obviously adds into the balance, and it's something that you've got to try and maintain too. What is that at the moment? Well,
I'm teaching. I'm a primary school teacher, but I'm teaching an autistic unit at the moment. But talking about it, I suppose it's becoming known now anyway, that I'm actually taking a career break and I want to do some study. Okay. I'm really interested in psychology and psychology of performance and getting the best out of individuals. I suppose it's the teacher in me combined with my passion for performing. So I'm looking at doing some study now going forward. So it's a really exciting time, and if there's one regret or one negative to it, is that I wish it would have happened maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But in saying that, I really enjoy teaching. But this is just something that I want to explore, and I want to find out more about. So that's where I'm at.
Was that a thought that really came in? You mentioned it on that period over the winter where you're thinking ahead and going, like,
definitely, when
that vacuum comes in and just goes like, when hurling's out the window for a minute, it does make you take stock and be like, well, what's the plan for me and where am I going? It sounds like you've got a pretty good handle on that. I suppose you mentioned there sort of maybe wishing you did it 6 or 7 years ago. Like, what age are you now? You're 28. Like, because that was again, it's something similar I thought of before. I was like, you know, I should have done that. And I think everyone sort of always has that thought of, why didn't I do this years ago? But like, I suppose if you had probably done it a couple of years ago, I don't know, like, maybe you wouldn't appreciate it as much. No. Maybe you wouldn't have even got there. Because I know when I was in college when I was younger, I was like, it was an absolute ego. Like, you know, you'd be barely going in. You just and it's going back to what we said earlier on. Like, you literally just did the minimum you had, just so like you could play your sport and be like, that's cool. Yeah. Whereas, and I don't know if you've started yet or ever, but like, I went back and I did a learning experience like later on in life, and like I actually wanted to go, and I was like I liked it. Completely, like, do you know what I mean? Like, what's wrong with me?
You won't go out 3 or 4 nights a week.
No, well, that's definitely not. But like, you're actually like, oh my, like, I actually enjoy learning. And it actually just flipped that whole. I don't know what it was, that because I think, like, particularly in GA circles, I think a lot of our younger players think, like, get into college, get a scholarship, play hurling, play football, grand, get through it, and worry about it a little bit down the line. And I think lads definitely are becoming a bit more tuned into that space. And I suppose that would in a way, it would bring me on to sort of, if it's within the captaincy role of the team or just being part of a leadership group within a team, our lads, do you feel lads are getting more in tune with that? Because again, like, I go back, the reality is like GA is brilliant. Like, we all love playing it. Like, it can give you so much. But at the end of the day, come 31, 32, 33, it's not really going to be there anymore at that elite level. And just getting lads tuned in a little bit and trying to build moving that forward, is that something that the group yourself, or even yourself as a leader in that group, take seriously?
Definitely. I suppose the thing to remember here is that like all of this kind of professionalism, it didn't happen that long ago. You know, like I suppose 2007, 2008 was really kind of when the biggest changes started coming, and you know, there was a lot more emphasis put on S&C and sports science, and you know, the whole conditioning of players, and that approach really kind of escalated. So I think what has happened in between is there's been that period of everyone just focusing on, well, how can we get the most out of our team, and players thinking, well, like this is getting really, really competitive, like, and you just focus like, I have to give this 100%. And what has happened, I think now, is that we've kind of gone through that period of where I think, I won't say the bubble has burst, but I think that people in the bubble are starting to look outside the bubble, and that they're actually seeing, well, we can do this and you can perform at a really top level, but let's not neglect what's outside, and like we can try to find a balance. And that is probably the way we've been your typical like situation, where we were in that bubble, and now we've realised that, you know, there's more to life than sport. We all love sport, and listen, I'm as committed as anyone, and you know, I think we've shown our levels of commitment, and every GA. I
don't think that's up for discussion.
Yeah, like I've always, that's the one thing that actually I would have a kind of like, it kind of ekes me a little bit, is when people question the commitment of a GA player. So it's like, how can you question the commitment of somebody who voluntarily gives up so much of their time to play something that they love? And that's one thing, like, I just hate about that, you know, that whole perception in the GA. But, you know, I just think that the awareness of life off the pitch, and life after sport, or life after an inter-county career or a club career, or, you know, just life in general, and that whole journey. I think that, listen, like, you can look at this from a number of angles. I would say that my hurling journey has helped me an awful lot off the pitch as well. Like, I have learned, you know, how to live by so many values in that through sport. I've learned so much. But like, you know, I think you can use both of them. They work from each other. And like, as I mentioned already about that, I'm repeating myself, but that balance of off the pitch and on the pitch, like, it's really hard to find it.
So important though.
Being aware of it is the first step. And if we could do anything for the next generation that are coming up, is to make them aware of the need for balance in your life. And listen, absolutely, go for it with sport, go for it whatever, but go for it off the pitch as well, and go for it in a career, or go for it, you know, and make the most of yourself. Like, we have found out that there's been so many exceptional individuals that have been involved in GA that have just went for it off the pitch as well and been really successful. And there's lots of more people like that. You know, and it's just, can we just create the awareness of that, you know, that there's so much potential among us as a culture, just in general, like even taking the sports side out of it, can we actually just get the most out of ourselves? And that's something that I'm really passionate about as well, and that's probably why I want to maybe study a little bit more along psychology of performance, and just in life coaching, and helping people fulfill their potential.
Like you said, and obviously it ties in with help people fulfill their potential. Excuse me, but I suppose that's probably would that have been one of the things that drew you to teaching initially?
Yeah, definitely.
And I suppose with the teaching question, I'm going to follow up with, because I think a lot of people, again, going back to your perceptions, is like they think GA players, right, they're teachers, you know, summer's off, handy job, finish at 3 o'clock and let them train. But even within that and within your own life, you obviously chose to get out of that bubble early doors as well, and you mentioned the autism unit as well. For me anyway, just right to someone that says, no, I'm not just taking the comfort zone here and just going to teach this class and check in and check out. You actually stepped out a bit and went, I'm going to try something a little bit different. And I'm just curious as to what that was like, or even where that rationale to make that decision came from. I had done resource teaching, which is working with children with special needs, and I really enjoyed that. And I basically made my decision on that premise, like that. Okay. I enjoyed that, let's have a go at this. And I'm not one to shy away from a challenge, so I kind of saw it as a little bit of a challenge. I've seen some highlights on YouTube as well, on the pitch and off the pitch.
I just saw it as something that I thought I could learn an awful lot from, and I have. And to be honest, just actually reflecting back on when I started realising about balance and putting life into perspective, that was definitely a turning point in my life. Just realising the challenges that people go through on a day-to-day basis that we take for granted. And I really started it changed my outlook on life and on just the challenges that are out there for people. And the fact that I'm helping some way in a number of children, like that they're some way able to accommodate their challenge, that they're able to get through a day, that's really rewarding. And it's definitely kind of just opened up my whole outlook on, like maybe putting myself into other people's shoes and starting to think about other people a bit more. And I like going back to the bubble, I think people have a bubble in their own lives as well, where they might think that certain things are a certain way and that everyone sees it the same way. But I've started to learn, and I've learned over the past 3 years that, like people can look at the same wall and see something completely different. So, that was probably what sparked it and started it off for me, that my kind of change on my outlook of what life was,
Yeah, it's really interesting to think, as you outlined there. I think it seems to have ignited a little spark somewhere that was down in you. I suppose I'm just curious a little bit around the sort of the challenges you say that brings, or maybe challenging your outlook a little bit. Like, what do you mean by that? Or
it's a lot of it is based around social interaction. Someone with ASD struggles an awful lot with social skills and just basic interaction skills. Communication,
just social skills that, for example, me and you would take for granted from being part of a team or whatever. You take that for granted.
The most basic thing about being able to say hello, to greet someone, and to actually convey their feelings. So if you're asked how are you, a child or a person with ASD mightn't actually have awareness of how they feel. So you have to work an awful lot on creating, developing their awareness of themselves and how they can communicate their needs. So with some children it's through visual schedules, through visual aids. With other kids then it's just verbal. Some kids need that, actual interaction to learn something. It really is individualised, and it's just kind of highlights to you like that, you give an instruction and you think it should be just a basic instruction, and then you realise that they don't understand it, and they find it a challenge to understand it. So it's really kind of, it strips everything back for you, and you start working on things that you think should come to everyone naturally.
Listening to you talking there, like I come from a communications background. I've been communication manager, say, with spunout.ie, which is the information website. Was part of the communication team in the GA, but that experience, that overview that you just outlined there, actually to me sounds like an absolute masterclass in like human communication. Like, I suppose just as I was listening to you talking there, like the big thing that I was thinking about as you were chatting there is that communication skills and how that challenged you. Does that make you a better captain for Tipperary in 2016?
That's a good question. It probably does, actually, yeah. Because what it did over that time of where I was, my first few months in the job, I'll never forget. Do you know when you're going into a job and you're trying to learn as much as you can, but it's not until you actually start doing the job that you really start learning. And those first few months were just unbelievable, where I was kind of going like, this is life-changing, like this, I'm seeing things completely different.
And you're just learning on your feet every day as well, as
really
opposed
learning on your feet. Now, I was lucky because I had a teacher in the school that was there was a unit already in the school, so I was able to base my structures and my methods a lot on what she had done, and that was she was brilliant to help me out. And I did a lot of courses like before starting, but there's only a certain amount you can learn in courses. It's at the end of the day, it's only information. Like I probably think, I mentioned about putting yourself in other people's shoes and trying to see what they're seeing. And, it definitely is something I would have tried to use as captain of the team. Like, just what works for me doesn't work for everyone else. And just trying to maybe approaches in terms of trying to meet the needs of certain players, or, it might be some lad that's having, that's struggling with studies, or in the middle of exams, and you don't think about these things maybe naturally, like because you're so focused on yourself. But as captain, that's one of the responsibilities that you have to realise, like that there's lads going through a lot off the pitch here, without having a negative impact on your own performance. You need to be able to just be aware of that, and even make other players aware of that, and speak openly to the group, saying like, we're all here to help each other, and that there's somebody there at the end of a phone call if you want to talk to someone. Or it's something that I don't think maybe we're open enough about in the GA. It's again that whole kind of culture, or it maybe is a little bit of a negative that exists in the GA, where lads don't feel comfortable being open with each other.
It's definitely it's definitely a self-awareness piece first and foremost, and I think that sort of naturally transforms into a awareness of others. Because like one thing, like, it used to do my nuts in, like, when you're involved in different teams. Like, and we've all heard the line before where someone says, "Oh, Alan doesn't have the hunger anymore," or Brendan doesn't have the hunger anymore. Don't the classic just doesn't have it in him anymore, doesn't want it enough. Rather than just thinking, well, like, is there something going on in that person's life that's actually, affecting them, or what if they are here, or sometimes why they're not here. It was just something that always it always sort of grind the gear with me, and it got me thinking around sort of leadership, I suppose, from a top level and within GAA. And I think the GAA naturally does produce an awful lot of good leaders, and like in any field of life, there's also ones that end up in roles that maybe it's not the right fit for them. I suppose from my own experience both on the field and off the field, I was just curious to have a bit of a conversation around leadership, and just even at the top level, what's your perception of what a good leader is?
I suppose what I tried to do, and I learned an awful lot from both previous captains, managers, selectors, all the people that were there to assist. I tried to take in as much information as possible to try and adapt, because like, I wasn't a ready-made captain, and I don't think you're born as a leader.
That's what I was going to ask you. That how much, in terms of captaincy or leadership, because it's sort of the same thing. Like, but how much of it is natural, and how much of it is learned?
I would say the natural bit in a leader is the bit that maybe makes them want to learn, that makes them a better leader, if that makes sense. Like, so you have natural people that want to learn and want to get the best out of themselves and want to lead. Sure. So I think that there is that natural sense in it.
And do you think you have that?
Like, I do, yeah.
I was reading last night, and I think Liam Sheedy in an interview mentioned about a speech you gave after a minor defeat in one of the minor games. Did you use the Munster final?
Yeah, I don't even remember that.
But that's the natural bit where it's just like, this is in me, and it just comes out, and you're not afraid to sort of articulate it.
Yeah, but I think there is leadership in other people that maybe they don't tap into, or I definitely think leaders can be developed as well, and good leaders need to be developed. Or what you perceive as a good leader can always develop. And just I don't know. I just try to be myself as much as possible, because as you said, we spoke before about, you're very quick. It's very easy to see a lad that's not being himself, or trying to be someone he's not. So that was the one thing I said to myself. I'm not going to try and change. I'm obviously, after being given the role, because of the way I was naturally in the dressing room, the way I'm naturally in the pitch. So don't change yourself. Just be authentic, and just try and build up trust. I place a lot of trust in my teammates, and I'm just looking for that in return. And I try to do that by just being myself and being honest, and having a good positive attitude, where I wanted to speak more with my actions. I do a lot of talking as well, naturally. That's just me. But I was very conscious that, if I'm talking about giving effort, and if I'm talking about giving 100%, well, then I have to be giving 100% every time I go out there. So I can't be saying one thing and doing another. So that was kind of the approach I took while I was there.
Yeah, I think, like, in one way, sport definitely helps us learn quickly in that regard, because you very quickly find out what works and what doesn't, because there's a result, and that speech was crap, and or if it's off the field stuff as well, or if meetings aren't running properly. Like, sport really highlights cracks very quickly if things aren't going well. But in terms of, if it's leadership skills from being involved with Tipperary or with the club at home, how that translates off the field, I suppose, and I think you touched upon it before, that it has helped.
Yeah, I would say, what I've tried to tap into is, like, just realising, look, you give so much effort, you try so hard every time you go out on the pitch, and you're always committed, and you've a good attitude. Like, let's apply that to everyday life, and let's apply it to any task. Or
how long do you think you're doing that? Because you know, we talked about earlier on around the sort of just being at sport and sort of everything else was just a knock on. How long do you think you're chipping away at giving other aspects of your life that focus or that energy?
Honestly, probably only in the past 3 to 4 years. I'd say my first few years in teaching, I wasn't engaged. It was just a means. It was a way of earning a few quid, and all I was thinking about was hurling. You know, that's just being honest about it. And I hope there's not going to be principals listening to this. He was in my school, but that's just being honest. Like I'd like to think I'm a decent teacher, like that. I'm good at my job, but you know, like I would definitely say that I wasn't getting the best out of myself in those first few years, and it was because I was in that bubble, and I was just, all I cared about was hurling, you know, and when's training, when's the next session, and it's a bad place to be in, because you know you neglect so much. But I like to think in the last 3 years especially, the working in the ASD unit has definitely changed me in a positive way.
Sure, sounds like it.
But I'd like to think that before that I had maybe changed, and that is probably why I made that decision. You know, so I'd like to think the last 3-4 years that I've really been kind of in that zone.
It's I suppose the last question that I have, particularly on the leadership aspect, like I think from a pretty young age, you are probably earmarked as someone who was a leader in a group, if it's captain the minors, or if it's been selected if it's to Tipperary. Has leadership ever felt like a burden in any way? And just like, because there's a lot of pros to it, but there's also, I'd imagine, some cons. Do you know what I'm saying?
There is, yeah. Like, I'd say, as I said about trying to learn from previous captains and that, like there was lads that kind of highlighted those little things that can get to you, and it's stuff around, like, you know, getting texts from lads saying, what's the story with the gear? Do you know, all this usual crack that goes on? You're like, why? I don't know. Why are you texting me? Like, and it's just when you're captain, they think you know everything. Like, what time are we training on Sunday? I don't know. I haven't a clue. Like, we haven't.
I'm not the manager.
Yeah. So it's, you know, all of those things used to like piss me off a little bit. But then you just learn to like kind of just, you know, let it over the head a little bit, and have a bit of crack with it then sometimes as well. But like, definitely, yeah, that was something that because I was prepared for it, I suppose it didn't get to me as much, but I definitely was kind of going, yeah, that's annoying, like, you know,
just little things.
That's the one thing I don't miss now.
Yeah.
You know, like, it obviously really enjoyed my time as captain. I was really lucky to get 3 years, and you know, really grateful to the people who chose me and kept me on in that role. And but like, you know, it was the one thing I was saying to Pádraig, like when Pádraig took over, I was like, I'm not going to miss the text messages and all of that about different things. And,
have you texted him annoying him about the gear yet?
Yeah, like every night. But but look, there is, and I suppose it is just about the way you perceive it, and like, do you take it as a burden, or do you kind of take it for what it is? Because at the end of the day, stuff like that is not important to the overall picture of what are we trying to do here. You're trying to be the best that you can be in terms of like as an individual and then as a team, and all of that kind of stuff doesn't really matter. What matters is the bond that you have with your group, the unity you create, the enjoyment you get out of it, and the experience of it.
I think in GA anyway, the captaincy role sometimes gets a bit, I don't know if as a culture or as a sport we have a full sort of understand necessarily of what it is at times. Or sometimes I think we play it down a little bit, the importance of a good captain. Yeah. It's something that it's definitely I've thought about it over the years, because you know, you hear the stereotypical, sure, it doesn't matter who's captain, like we 15 leaders out in the field, and I fully, you know, I accept that, and I think it's really important to have leaders all over the field. But for me, the relationship between the captain and the manager sort of facilitates the growth of that culture. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think one happens without the other first of all. And I don't know, I suppose what I was thinking, or just what I was wondering about, was sort of, what is the role, in your opinion, of the modern GA captain as such? Like, it's...
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, where you said the relationship between kind of manager to captain to vice captain to kind of that maybe leadership group that exists to the rest of the players and the rest of the group. That kind of link and that chain is really important. And it works both ways. So it is a chain. You know, it's like the chain of a bike. Like it's not top to bottom or bottom to top. It is just like it is a chain, and it's a constant. Like the way we try to use it is a constant link of communication where we're challenging each other. We're giving feedback to management on different things. They're giving feedback to us, and it's a constant communication where we're getting the best out of this group, and we're getting the best out of this setup. And you know, like it's. I think the modern captain is the guy who is a good communicator, but also sets a good example because he's looked up to, even if he doesn't think he is.
Yeah.
And that was something I probably didn't realise, like that. I was that guy who, and I still probably said it up until the end of last year, where I was saying like it's only a role, you know. Yeah. But I suppose you do have to be a particular way to be in that role, and it's not for everyone, you know. And people take it as a burden, and but like I really enjoyed it, I embraced it, and I'd like to think that it was naturally a good fit for me, you know.
Yeah, because I know you can say, you know, it's just a role, but it's one of the things that came to mind, like particularly for the likes of yourself, like, you know, if it's Tipperary hurling or Dublin football, the real sort of, like, in a way, like, without being smart about it, like, they're sort of these little franchises in their own right. And as captain of a team, whether you like it or not, you sort of naturally become a certain face of that. Yeah. And it was one of the things I noticed, and when we were away, and we were both in New York in October that time, we crossed paths, and you'd Liam McCarthy with you and different things. And I really noticed it around that night, where it was like, you know, like, it's nearly over there. I'd say that was a very different day-to-day experience than Brendan at home, like, you know, because you're a face, and you're recognised, like, people are looking at you and probably expecting one thing, whatever. And it was just something that I suppose I thought about it quite a bit, like, because it jumped out at me for that trip. And I suppose winning the All-Ireland takes you to a different level.
Yeah, it does. But like, I suppose it goes back to, like, you know, people maybe can get caught up in having to behave a certain way or be a certain way in situations like that. Yeah. But I think people appreciate when you're yourself, like.
Nah,
so if you're a goofy character, you should be that character, and people will appreciate it. It's that authenticity, like so people will read into you if you're trying to be something that you're not. People see it straight away, and then they just kind of that's where you lose trust. Yeah. So I just try to be myself in situations like that, and just enjoy it, like, and, you know, have the crack, like. And I really enjoyed that trip, like, it was brilliant.
100%, yeah.
And, you know, and learned a lot from it, you know, and met a lot of great people, yourself included. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know, like, I suppose it is you have to think of it. I kind of just see it as just be yourself, like. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my approach. And if people don't like you for it, then that's fair enough. That's their choice, and that's another thing you have to accept, that you're not going to please everyone. And that was probably one flaw I had definitely in my first year. I was trying to please everyone and make sure that everyone was happy, and when you have
it's not how the world works.
It's not how it works, and you just stop caring a little bit more then as you go along. I know you don't, but like you just learn as you go. That's what we said about the same as the job. You learn on your feet, and I definitely was not by any way, shape or form the perfect captain, but I'd like to think that I did myself justice in my time there, and that I was myself. That's the big thing for me.
Is there any major difference between winning the All-Ireland just as a player on the team and being the captain? Like, obviously there are quite a few years apart as well, like, but does it feel different, or is there a different vibe to it in a way?
Yeah, that's another thing, like, that I remember after the All-Ireland, like, and, you know, all the boys were jumping around the dressing room, and I was talking to Marty outside, like, because, you know, it's just, there's certain.
At least I wasn't the fella that dragged you out to do it.
But little things like that, you know, where you, whereas, and that was probably my own fault as much as that, where I probably just should have said, you know what, like, just give me 5 minutes.
Yeah, be active.
But that's maybe going back to my trying to please everyone. I tried to please everyone that day, and I probably just should have taken a few minutes for myself to be in and just embrace it with the lads. And that was one thing that kind of annoyed me afterwards, thinking back on it.
Sure, just missed those couple of minutes.
I missed that first few minutes. When you go back into the dressing room, I missed that first 2 minutes, and that was the one negative out of winning the All-Ireland.
First world problems.
But just little things like that, that is different, I suppose, when you're a captain than when you're a player. But in saying that, like, I mean, we had an amazing few days afterwards, like where just the reception we got and the crack we had together, it was just, it was unbelievable.
I think you've touched upon it there in terms of Sport taking over the captaincy role. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously, I've absolutely no doubt you're still a very, very prominent figure in the dressing room, a good leader. I don't think you'd be the type of lad that needs a captaincy role. I think leadership and communication just oozes off you, and those sort of traits that I certainly would appreciate or associate, I should say, with a good leader. The thing I'm thinking about here is actually to step away from the role. First and foremost, what was that conversation like to have? And then the second thing, is it liberating to be back just playing and not having to deal with some of the stuff that you talked about?
Yeah, I have to be honest here now and just say it is like. And,
really?
That's probably just after the last couple of months now where I've been back playing and just been back in it. Before we got back and I was asked that question, I probably said, no, sure, it won't be any different. But like it is, just realistically it is. And I suppose to go back to when the change was made, I was expecting it, and if it was my call, I would have made the call.
Why were you expecting it? Just because everyone would always say the thing like, don't try and fix something that's not broken. You're after captain team to All-Ireland.
I just think it was the right time, and it was always, well, in my head it was always going to be Pádraig.
Yeah.
He was vice captain while I was captain, and he was just the perfect fit. And there was a couple of things that really I was surprised to get it for the third year, right? So,
okay.
And then I started thinking like, right, look, I've had a long enough chance at it now. We've won the All-Ireland, so I've fulfilled that kind of dream of lifting Liam McCarthy. It's time to give someone else an opportunity, but it's also time for the team to develop. So I saw it as a change for development, like that we're moving on here, like. So we're not going to be the same as we were last year. Let's move on and let's change it, but change it for the right reasons. And I don't think it wasn't just changed for the sake of change. It was really like it was the right decision.
No, it sounds like it.
And like it is, I definitely feel a little bit liberated like that. I'm not dealing with those little things and going to those, doing the little roles you have as captain. And I have to say, like it's easy probably for me to say it, having lifted the Liam McCarthy last year. It's easy for me to say, like I'm really enjoying it now. Yeah. But I am, and it is liberating that I'm really enjoying my hurling now as much as I ever had, and I'm just just really looking forward to just keeping playing and just enjoying the whole thing. And it's easy to say it after winning last year, but it's definitely just, I won't say change my approach, but I feel as if I'm enjoying it more now than I ever did.
Yeah, that's must be an incredibly good thing to be able to say.
It is, and it's like it might come across maybe a little bit the wrong way in here, but like
no, not at all.
It is just the way I genuinely feel like that. It's a combination of that whole like seeing your perspective of life off the field and your career off the pitch. It's a combination of all those things, but then I suppose having the change of being changing from that leadership role to now being a player, still want to lead and still want to help in any way I can, but just like really like just enjoying it. Like,
and being a little bit selfish, probably the way you're actually just like I want to play well and just and enjoy this for what it is. And don't get me wrong, you're obviously still impacting on the wider group and that, but actually just going like, I really just want to enjoy this game today and express myself.
Yeah, and that's just being 100% honest about it. That was probably the one thing that went against me over like my career to date is my like versatility.
Yeah.
And managers have, I'm going to say abused that, but it's the wrong way of saying it.
Yeah.
But like
you've taken one for the team at times.
Yeah, taking one for the team and like getting selfish about it. Like I want to express myself as much as possible. And
where is your spot? Where's your vision for you?
Midfield. Like look, that's where I was all last year, and really enjoyed my hurling last year. And there was like I had specific roles in specific games in terms of man marking and stuff like that, which has to be done.
Yeah, needs most.
And I have no problem doing that, but at the moment, like I'm just really enjoying playing as a midfielder and just expressing myself and realising, this is the way you are and this is when you are at your best. And probably I'm trying to play to those strengths a little bit more now. So that's when that's a perfect example of using what you learn off the pitch on the pitch.
I think that conversation of that transition of the leadership group, I think, is really interesting. on one hand, not one to start conspiracy theories, but I'm glad that it was all above board, because I read that you I was told that maybe it was because you forgot to congratulate Mick Ryan in the speech after the All-Ireland.
Oh, stop. Yeah, he still takes the piss out of me over that.
No, I'm only joking on that front.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually realise that. Someone said it to me earlier on.
He didn't either, sure.
Did he not?
Because I thought of it. That's a good one now. I said it afterwards. Like, I had a bullet point written out. First one, Mick and management, right?
Yeah.
Had it written down. I go back to that. So literally had the microphone left down, and I went about moving on, and I thought of it, and I was like, I can't go back and say it now, can I? And I had to make a decision there and then, and I made the wrong decision. And I literally straight away walked down the steps.
I presume the lads gave you a ribbon for that, did they?
I went straight to him, like, if you actually look back on that, I went straight down the steps. I was like, lads, I'm after forgetting you. And they went, what? Did you? Like, they genuinely, they were so hoping it. But
the lads give you an absolute ribbon, I'd say.
Yeah.
The last thing that I just want to finish up on, Brendan, is I pulled out two pictures from the Sports File archive. One will give you a laugh, and two is just I think it's a nice question to close out on. But as you'll see, there's these two boys here. That's obviously you lifting the minor All Ireland back in 2007, and that's just last year gone by. I suppose.
I'm not that big now, but my God, I was some weed.
I was going to say, what's the biggest difference in your life other than your arms? But no, I suppose what I'm getting at is, and when I actually listened back to the speech after the final last year, and I think you opened up with we're waiting a long 6 years, but we're back.
Yeah.
And I suppose the question that I'm going to close out on is the learnings you've taken both as an individual and maybe the team has taken between those two moments of how you build going forward, and to make sure that it's not another 6 year speech down the line, and that challenge for you both as an individual and as a group, and what's sort of in your mind for that immediate future and the long term future. And I'll close out with that question.
Tough question, Alan. Thanks. Look,
I didn't spend half an hour on Photoshop just for a wishy-washy question.
I'd say something that's important for us is continuity and developing. And whether, it's not an excuse, but we didn't have that natural progression after 2010. We had a change of management, sure, and it just interrupted the continuity from 2010 to 2011. And what followed then was players not buying into it and not giving enough. What we want to do this time, obviously, is we want to move forward, and we realise we do have a talented group, and there is talent there in Tipperary at the moment. And we just want to make sure that whenever we finish up handing over that jersey, it's a bit of a cliche, and I know the All Blacks have spoken about it, leaving the jersey in a better place. I'm not going to say we want to leave the jersey in a better place, but for us, we want to look back in our careers and say that we made the most of our time and that we don't have any regrets. We have regrets up to now, but we're seeing this as a new chapter, and we want to create a new chapter in our book, I suppose, in terms of like our story. It's for me, it's just about when I retire, I want to be able to look back and say, do you know what, I really enjoyed my time and I gave it everything.
I think that's the perfect note to end on, Brendan. Over the course of the interview, I think your passion for Tipperary hurling, first and foremost, just oozes through. And some of the things that I wanted to touch upon this podcast and over different episodes as well was around that leadership piece. And one of the things I'm so passionate about, and it's sort of where the whole philosophy and meaning of Real Talks comes from, is around helping people to be their personal best. And I think you covered that across so many different ways over the course of the conversation, be it on the field, off the field, in work and personal life, self-awareness, awareness of others, communication, resilience, leadership.
We covered a lot, did we?
It was... No, I just finish up by just thanking you sincerely for your time, for that conversation that we've just had. I feel really privileged to have got to chat through that and to touch upon those different things. I think there's a huge amount of learning in there, and I've absolutely no doubt anyone that's listened to this over the course of the last hour or so will take an awful lot away from it. And again, I just want to thank you for your time and wish you, both yourself and the team, the best luck for the season going forward. And hopefully we can touch in and check in down the line, and best luck with the studies and everything off the field as well. And we'll touch base, all right? Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So that's it for another week, and thanks so much for listening. to this episode of the Real Talks podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation with Brendan, make sure you find us on iTunes, SoundCloud or Stitcher by searching for Real Talks and subscribe to the show. There you can find last week's episode with Dublin's 4-time All-Ireland winner Kevin McManamon, a show which brought us up to number 3 in the iTunes podcast charts, ahead of huge productions like Serial. Don't forget, we'll be back next week with another memorable episode to help you see how GAA players are far more than just footballers or hurlers. Finally, thanks again to our sponsors, Kelly Bradshaw Dalton, who for over 20 years have been successfully selling, renting and managing property in the greater Dublin area. We are able to bring these podcasts to you to listen to for free thanks to their generous support and belief in the Real Talks way. Check them out at kbd.ie. That's kbd.ie. Real Talks, connecting people through meaningful conversations.